for All and art implementation. And I will just go ahead and hand it over to Susan. As a reminder, if you are watching this recording later, look at the description for the playlist or the description of the video, and the link to the feedback survey is there. If you complete that survey for watching the recording, you will receive one professional development renewal unit. So make sure to do that. Plus, we want your honest feedback. Your feedback brought us this series. So next year, next school year, when you come back and you're excited again and you've had a wonderful summer vacation, we are going to start back again in September with Energize on the first Tuesdays. That'll be 4 to 5. And then we'll have another series of the Indian Education for All across the content on the third Tuesdays. So we're really, really excited about that. And so my intention for next year is, since Wilhelmina did elementary school, ELA, well, then maybe next year I'll have either high school or middle school. So stay tuned, stay with us, and thank you so much for riding through this entire year with us. It has been so exciting. And if you've missed any of the other content area videos, check out our playlist on YouTube, and or email me and ask me for information, and I'm happy to get you any of our playlists. We have a lot of professional development that we recorded over the years. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much. Susan, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Jennifer and OPI, for inviting me to present to you all. I'm a visual arts teacher. This is my 14th year at Lame Deer Junior High and High School. And I have a tremendous amount of material. A lot of it's student work that I want to show you, but I feel that I should give you a little bit of background on myself. I think Jennifer's going to put up that first slide and we'll go from there. She's going to be my assistant. And I will start here. So this presentation is about looking back on my journey as a practicing artist and how I found my place in public education. I'm an educator as a second career, and I will have a couple videos at the end. I want to make sure I said that up front. There's 2 of them. I started out as an art director in advertising in Minneapolis, and I found that design world because I had a real strong interest in 8th grade, and I was told as a female that I could not become an architect. So I fought my way, stuck with design, and that became my blueprint for the future. I served many clients, a very diverse mix, created corporate campaigns, developed brands, marketing media through newspaper, magazine, TV, and radio. And there was no social media at that time. You can go ahead and switch the slide, Jennifer. One of my clients was Harley Davidson, to give you an idea of the diverse mix. This work was designed for the Paris runway shows and celebrated lifestyle and changes and helped change perception of the users of Harley Davidson products. Adventure brought me to Montana during the cattle drive in 1989. And from there, I decided to return to grad school and become certified to teach visual art. I landed a teaching job at Lame Deer in 2010. And these are my clients now. These are some portraits of my high school seniors from a few years ago. Go ahead, Jennifer. My whole philosophy is to say yes. You want to trust your intuition, take risks, please. Believe in your own beliefs. This is a map of a program. Oops. You got to go back forward there, Jennifer. 1. Okay, this map reflects locations of schools that were chosen through a program called Turnaround Arts. OPI offered this opportunity to us to submit an application to this program, and Lame Deer was chosen as one of 8 schools across the nation to participate in this pilot program, using the arts to help student engagement, improve student behavior, and academic achievement in the schools. It was a pilot project, and it lasted 3 years. Go ahead. With this partnership with Turnaround Arts, we were assigned a professional working artist. This is Damian Wetzel. He was a former dancer for the New York City Ballet, had danced for 23 years. And he was a colleague of Yo-Yo Ma's. And when the artist was scheduled to come to our school for the very first gathering, Yo-Yo sent 3 of his Silk Road Ensemble musicians, Christina Pato from Spain, Shane Shanahan from New York, upstate New York, and Ko Umezaki, who is Japanese and Danish. That was the beginning of now my 12-year relationship with these artists. So along with this program, Turnaround Arts, the initiative, I was sent to the Kennedy Center and trained in arts integration. And I'm going to read this statement to you. Arts integration is an approach to teaching in which students construct and demonstrate understanding through an art form. Students engage in a creative process which connects an art form in another subject area and meets evolving objectives in both. And basically, I follow this philosophy in my classroom to this day, integrating arts into every subject matter that I can possibly include. Of course, Indian education is always inserted in my lessons, my unit plans, and I'm always wanting to collaborate with anybody that's interested in bringing their content to the projects that I work on. In preparation for Silk Road's visit, you're good, Jennifer, go ahead there. I have students get involved from basically the get-go. Before the Silk Road artists came, my students, printmaking students, created 300 banners that were hung in the gymnasium along with the set, which you'll see in the next slide. The production process becomes my assignments. I am really focused on student voice. I want them engaged and taking ownership in these projects. So this is a shot of the setup before the artist arrived. And if you flip to the next slide, you will see the artist performing. You can see the banners hanging in the background. It was a really moving event. And this pretty much set the stage for, again, this next 12 years. Go ahead. Next slide, Jennifer. So these are just a close-up of the banners. The reason I show you this is because each one was an individual piece of artwork. You want to back up for just a second, Jennifer? Each banner is an individual piece of artwork. So like I said, there were 300 of them. We use them for gifts for artists. We had thank you notes written on them. It's just a nice way to get student work out there and leave a lasting impression on your guests and people that you may collaborate with, whether it's an art gallery or a museum, just people that have teamed up with you. Go ahead, Jennifer. Repayment from a Crane was a project that I took a major risk on. After meeting the Silk Road artists, I participated in a workshop after that first day that they performed, having the community gathering in the scene that I just showed you. During that first workshop, I was paired with the shakuhachi player, the Danish and Japanese shakuhachi player, Ko Umezaki. He and I had a rough time in my classroom getting the kids to relax and engage. So we scrapped all of the things we were trying, and Ko told a Japanese folktale to the students and played his shakuhachi to the students, which immediately calmed everybody down, and the students began to engage in the music. Later that day, a student stopped him in the hallway and repeated the Japanese folktale verbatim to him. And that was the beginning of a connection between the students and the artists, which again has lasted all this time. I took a risk because I asked Ko later on if he would like to collaborate on a project centered around repayment for the crane. And he, of course, said yes, which was really thrilling for me as an educator. And I had something in mind, tying the Japanese art forms with Cheyenne culture. And what I did was ask students to choose a passage in the story and illustrate it using their culture, if you will. And then I had two 8th grade girls produce a book. It was 34 pages long, and they're all original block prints. And we created 12 books. And in the back of the book is a CD pocket, because this piece of music made it onto Silk Road's 15th anniversary album. And once the books were completed, I sent them to Silk Road offices unannounced. And that is pretty much what sealed the deal for our partnership. And like I said, it's been going on for many years now. Go ahead. So what I've learned in teaching, because like I said, this is my second career, the number one thing is to listen to your students, hear what they have to say, build relationship with them. Without relationship, you cannot do much. And welcome that student's voice, because they're going to engage and work deeply towards the goals, having some decision, an opportunity to voice their thoughts and have a decision in this process. We also team up with Montana Shakespeare in the Schools and Montana Shakes. This is a partnership that's been going on for years. This is an example of how you can integrate other subjects by taking, students can choose passages from Shakespeare's writing. At our school, we like to have kids write those passages on the sidewalk, so that when the actors pull up to the school, they are already building some kind of relationship with the students in the morning. And by the time the play is performed, the kids are getting familiar, or a little familiar with the personalities of these human beings. And then when the workshops come around in the afternoon, they've really had a full day of exchanges, and the engagement becomes much richer. Go ahead, Jennifer. The relationships build trust, and that allows students to step forward, step out of their comfort zone, and leads to participation. You can see these two kids have Shakespeare garments, costumes on, which leads me to the next slide, and the next idea that I had after this happened. I invited the Shakespeare in the Parks costume designer to my classroom, along with a couple of colleagues, Susan Miller, who at the time was a managing director, and Stacy Hofspelter, who is a props designer. They were in my classroom for a week and presented this amazing lesson, which I use to this day. And I'm going to walk through just a couple of the steps to give you some ideas as to what you can do. What we had the kids do is randomly choose. Can you go back one slide for just a moment? Off this sheet of words, the process below the word process, there's some kind of difficult words, and I intentionally don't want the kids to completely understand the meaning of all these words because I like them to use the dictionary, and that's a need that my students have. They need to learn how to look words up, so I weave that into the assignment, and they write the definition down, and then they go to the second sheet, which is on the next slide. And I have adapted this second sheet of words to specifically to the Cheyenne tribe. And I highly suggest if you do something like this, that you consult your cultural educators or somebody trusted in the community that you respect so that you do the accurate and proper thing. So what happens with these words is a student combines them with the first difficult word that they chose, combining two characters together. For instance, a billowy, fire tender artist. What does that character look like? And that's their challenge, is to create their own vision of what that particular actor, person in a play might look like. So here is an example of students working on that process with Susan Miller. They've got the costume headpieces on. They have committed themselves to this project and they are fully active in it. The next slide will show you some results of this process. These are some just recent costume designs. I put 3 on a slide. And you can see we use recycled materials and we don't get too concerned about things being perfect. So you'll notice the main word is at the top of the board with the definition. Some students like to write out all the definitions of the word. For instance, grotesque is quite long. And then they have to sketch out their character. I want to see their vision before they actually execute it. And then we resource materials from all over. And we'll give you a little hint. I had a fabric design house out of New York City contact me wanting to donate their sample fabrics once the season was over. So I have boxes and boxes of beautiful fabrics from all over the world, which is another opportunity to teach geography and so on. Next slide. This is just a little moment with Claudia where students were so grateful to her. They thanked her and gave her a pair of earrings. So that connection is just something so dear to my students and to me. And I find that artists are so willing to give, and it's very meaningful and memorable for my students. I always like to make sure that students are writing thank you notes, and you'll see another one later. I also partner with local organizations. In this case, this is an equine therapy and art therapy session during Native American Week, where kids studied the symbols used in Native American culture for war, for other things, and they are painting horses. The next slide, it will show you a little bit of a close-up on that. And also, it also leads to opportunities teaching, things like horse anatomy, where you could tie science into it, or even horsemanship for PE. So partner with your community members that are close by, make friends and use their skills, bring them in. Another art therapy project that we have worked with, Jennifer Thompson, is constructing brushes out of natural materials. So these could be very significant to the tribes or the area. These are made out of cedar and pine and sinew and sticks, believe from the Sun River. And once the brushes have been constructed, then we did full scale paintings. The paper was on the floor that involved full body movement. So you get that physicalness incorporated into this assignment. It's also a lot of fun. So what happens when strangers meet? This is an example of the my classroom. Cleared all the desks out and had the Great Falls Symphony musicians come. It's a group called Cascade Quartet, and they travel to schools, I believe, on the off season. And the kids were somewhat standoffish at first because they play classical music, but they were wonderful in weaving in modern day rock and also the Star Wars theme. So once that happened, you can see this young man stepped up, sat down, never had an instrument in his hands, and this wonderful musician is showing him how the cello works. So we try our best to make the work meaningful and relatable to students somehow. This is an exchange between a high school ballerina from Missouri who was interested in pursuing social work, and she devoted her whole spring break to Lame Deer K-12 with her work as a ballerina and dance. And we teamed up and kids danced for her, she danced for them. We had discussions about high school life. And we also did a fashion shoot inside the Industrial Arts Workshop. And as you can see on the right-hand side, there, one of my students is trying on the ballerina's toe shoes. And of course, they tried to stand up on the toe block, which was pretty fun. I encourage people to converse with one another. Another conversation came between my students and Ko Umezaki. Again, he's Japanese, and students were very curious about Asian food, specifically Japanese and Korean. And the discussion got going about ramen noodles, which of course we all know are popular with all kids. And Ko decided we would cook together. So he came from LA, where he lives, armed with all sorts of Japanese ingredients straight from the Tokyo grocery store in LA. The kids in turn, so when he came, the kids wrote poetry, performed the poetry with Christina Pato, who plays the bagpipes, along with the food. Can you back up for just a second, Jennifer? The kids cooked ramen with Ko, and then in turn, the kids taught him how to make fry bread. So it was a really delightful 2 days. And as you see, the aprons the kids are wearing come from the printmaking students of mine, and I'll explain the symbolism on the apron in another slide. I say accept the invitation. So this call came to me from Turon Arts, and it was an invitation to participate in the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery self-portrait project. And of course I said yes, but we only had 2 weeks, which was a little bit crazy, but I took a risk and had the kids sort of what I call zig when everyone else is zagging, because I figured the portraits would be drawn or painted. We worked in clay, which was probably a crazy idea on my part because clay needs time to dry and be fired, but we made it. And they created these beautiful clay bead portraits. And the next slide will show you what they look like hanging in the White House amongst other school portraits. And you get an idea how great they were and how diverse they were. So what I like to say is,
I'm hanging out here for a second because this is amazing. I'm just taking this in, that these are made in record time and then sitting in the White House. That's just amazing. And by the way, I'm having some difficulties with my mouse, so I'm not meaning to like over advance or take time advancing. So thank you for forgiving me.
Sorry for repeating myself, but I just was like, I want to make sure I hit the right point at the right place, not confuse it any more than it probably is. But what I want to say about it's the next slide. It's the White House a little bit further away, but I have learned to you check your email frequently, listen to your voicemails, answer the call, respond to text messages. You never know. Never know what opportunities are there. And you will see in the next slide the moments. This kid, we performed at the White House for the First Lady and the President, along with these self-portraits that are in the hallways there that you just saw. And the kids were supposed to leave their cell phones in the basement of the White House before they entered the, I believe it's the East Room, which is that sort of golden room where you see a lot of artists singing and performing and being honored. And this student of mine, after the whole event was over, she pulls up this selfie. I couldn't believe it, but I was so happy she had her phone. So a few years ago, I think it was 2019, I was asked by Silk Road and the Harvard Graduate School of Education, we work a lot with because Silk Road is based there. And they asked me to define this work as a teacher. And so I'm going to read this to you because these are my words, but I have to read it. But it's really pretty much sums it up for me. So these partnerships have encouraged me to further challenge my experience as an educator and practicing artist. In the process, I have learned how to identify my own inherent gifts and utilize them to create a deeper connection with the young people in my classroom. There's incredible hidden value for you if waiting there, if you do step out, take the risks, both personal and professional. So this isn't an example of what was offered to me because I happen to be in this program and surrounded by these amazing people. They wanted me to curate a student art exhibit in the Kennedy Center halls. And to me, this was a once in a lifetime opportunity. So I say, the more you participate, these opportunities will present themselves. You just have to be willing to try. This next slide, this project was born out of my participation in the pilot, the first cohort year of Montana Teacher Leaders in the Arts. This was my field project. I proposed a photography project that involved Ko Umezaki and students. We took them on a field trip throughout Lame Deer, just at key areas like the playground of the elementary school, the grocery store, the People's Park. I think we went over to the college also. We just did everything on foot. And along the way, we had cell phones and the students photographed areas. But the concept was these photographs would be stitched together with a little app that you had on your phone. It was called 360, but I don't believe it exists anymore. Along the way, we also recorded sounds. And this photograph was a real standout and interesting results. I find it to be an exceptional piece. The next slide, really, I want to talk about the power of environment. So I love to take kids off campus and get them into realistic places, meaning practicing like studio spaces and working with professionals, because I think it sort of cuts out the middleman in terms of getting comfortable to space as a young person and knowing what to expect. And so we do a lot of work with the Archie Bray Foundation in Helena. This student had never worked in clay before. We were there for 3 days. We worked with an artist in residence by the name of Michelle Summers, and it was a tremendous experience and left me wanting to come to return with more students, which now I have, which you'll see in just a minute. We also, I started this 14 years ago, the Miles City, actually the Custer County Art and Heritage Center had a traveling raku kiln. This is one of my early connections to Native American art with Japanese raku firing. And we do this during Native American Week, where we burn horsehair onto our clay pieces. This is out in the parking lot, and you can see the weather was quite challenging, but was a lot of fun. And it was very popular. And unfortunately, they don't offer that program anymore through the art center, but I would love to see somebody start that up again. This is a photograph from our experience this summer, participating in the First Fire project at the Archie Bray Foundation. Archie Bray brought in, I believe it's 6 Indigenous artists from across the United States, representing many, many tribes. They were there for 2 weeks. We spent a week with the artists, kind of on the sidelines. I had 4 students there, and these students just skyrocketed the first day and didn't stop. We were there for, I think we worked for 5 days. And the next slide, you'll see one of my students with his piece he created, and he's visiting and getting a critique from Raven Half Moon, who was one of the working artists. And even today, almost a year later, the kids are constantly texting the artists and exchanging ideas and asking questions, messaging them however they can. It's been a tremendous relationship, and we're looking forward to another residency here this summer coming up. I think I have another slide of another 2 students. And you can see their confidence. I mean, the pieces they built were enormous. They were solid, way beyond anything they had built in my classroom just, a month before. Another project that I've done for many years is the kids were wanting to learn how to play chess. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to create our own chessboard and pieces. And so the kids choose an iconic symbol from their tribe, and we then assign that symbol to a particular chess piece. And then they have to build, of course, doubles of everything because of the way chess is set up. So that integration can involve math, it can involve, I guess, sportsmanship and, Native American culture. I was taught early on to make the work meaningful to students, and boy, that has power. And I just talk to myself about that every day. These are linoleum blocks that are designed students, that first they designed. They are symbols. It's a combination of musical symbols and the Cheyenne symbols. The designs are created out of musical notes, so there has to be a part of a musical note in every line. We did this for another Silk Road visit to the school, and I will point out, I didn't notice this before as I was putting the slideshow together, but the block on the left, it looks sort of like a tree. That is a chokecherry bush. Just to give you an idea, you can look at the what do I say, the top of the tree, and those are musical notes, but it's all composed of musical notes. Anyway, when I talked about the aprons in that kitchen photograph earlier on, the second image, the TP from the left, was printed on those aprons. So we use those images over and over to get the work out and to have it function in a different way, besides just turning in an assignment. What happened well, I'll talk about that in just a minute. So this graphic represents just last year. So another thing that I do in my printmaking class, and I have from the very beginning, so I have 14 years of a collection of these. We are the Morning Stars. We're not the Cougars, the Jaguars, or the Bears. We are the Morning Stars. And so these symbols are all my students' interpretations, modern day interpretations of the traditional Morning Star. And so I have one, starting with 2010. So this is 2023's Morning Stars. And it has been a very popular assignment for students. And so we'll go to the next slide and I will show you a little bit about what has happened with them. So we have oftentimes attended art walks in Billings, and we've attended in Bozeman and Helena as well. I used to do that on a regular basis. And we got to know a lot of the gallery owners just because I'd show up with these a group of 10 kids with cameras, and they'd be looking at artwork, and it was a chance for them to learn how to introduce themselves and ask permission to take photographs. And I said one night to one of the gallery owners, I said, would you be willing to talk about a possible exhibition? Immediately he said yes. So I said, okay, let's get together. So we planned it out. Silk Road said yes to us. We'd love to come and perform, fly in and perform, because the artists live all over the country. And it took us a year to get it together. But you can see some of the Morningstar prints on the tables sort of spread out. That's inside the gallery, the Stapleton Gallery in Billings. They were so gracious. So the next slide shows the opening of the exhibition. And if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see that TP again that was on the aprons, and there it is on a banner. We printed on that fabric that had been donated to us from New York City, beautiful pieces of fabric. We had prints on paper that were framed. We had also some bowls that were set on a table that were styled after Mimbre bowls that had the kids' designs that reflected their Indian names. And everything was for sale. We opened and sold, I think, 80 pieces out of that show. And the kids, we split the money with the kids and the gallery and the school, so they all learn how to negotiate and bill and cash a check. So you'll see Co and Shane and Christina there leading the kids into the gallery. They're performing a musical piece. And I'll go to the next slide. There's a few more shots. Oh, the title of the show was, Promise Under the Morning Star. And so here are some people on the left shopping for bowls. And on the right-hand side was a collaboration with Ben Pease. He's Northern Cheyenne and Crow. He came to my classroom. We painted a teepee canvas and hung it on the wall and put it up for sale. So I really believe the kids need to understand how things are done professionally and respectfully in the bigger world. And so I say, treat the work with grace. So in every step of the way, we try to be as graceful as we can. And this exhibit was beautiful, and the work had room to breathe, and people had a chance to see it all and talk with the students. Which gives them experience in communicating. So that, all the standards there's just so many standards that are hit. And I think that's important in any educational setting. So the reason I say is act with grace or work with grace is that in the middle of this preparation for this exhibit, we lost a student. She disappeared. And unfortunately, she was found and she had passed. 3 weeks later, we had her artwork. She had designed a Morning Star. And I had her clay work. She was one that I took to the Archie Bray Foundation. You can go ahead and switch the slide, Jennifer, if you can. And this photograph will show her. Her name was Henny Scott, and this is her Morning Star design. And these are the clay pieces she had done 3 weeks before she passed. And so we had to, we wanted to show her work, got permission from her family, and we wanted to honor her in a way, the only way we knew how, which was to dedicate a room to her work at the exhibit. And the next slide will show we invited her mom, Paula, and we'll just leave it at that. Students also, there was an opportunity to march in our community regarding missing and murdered Indigenous women. And so my students rounded up Henny's linoleum block that she had cut for her Morning Star. And we made posters and signs, and we marched in the parade on Henny's birthday. I just saw a question that pop up. Did we give the work to Henny's family? And the answer is yes. I had permission to hold on to it for a while, if that's a question. And then I met with her mom and handed everything over. And this is not the first time I have had to do that. I had to do it last week. We lost another student, and it's tough. But the artwork also helps families and people heal, and they're grateful to have it. So it works. It's magic. Let's switch gears a little bit. And I was asked to dream big, and we were invited to Boston to perform with Silk Road Ensemble members and Yo-Yo Ma for a Harvard fundraiser. And so these are my kids in the subway learning how to ride the trains and navigate their way through. I took 9 along with a chaperone, another chaperone from the school. And we were there for a week. We were all over Boston. And the next slide will show you student artwork being projected behind the Silk Road Ensemble with Yo-Yo Ma. Oops, I think we skipped a slide there. Let's see. Oh, so let me back up. Sorry, you're good, Jennifer. These are my students answering Yo-Yo Ma's questions. He's so delightful and so kind, and they filled him in on everything he asked. And this is before the performance, and he just put them at ease. You can see their faces, and they're just so cute together. So that joy and the pride of where they come from and the leadership that emerged from these kids was amazing. The next slide will show student artwork that was created for this performance and projected behind these artists performing. There were 5 paintings that one of my students did in 5 days. And another wonderful opportunity for him. And then of course he sold, I think, all of them to people in the audience and to some artists. So there's just so many things that can happen. The next slide will show Ko on the sidelines, working with one of my students, Mihaela, who had barely learned how to play the flute. I mean, barely. And he's got her on the sidelines trying to compose a melody. And there they are in between all this other stuff going on. And it was just so wonderful to watch them kind of in the shadows, just taking advantage of a moment. The next slide will show Mihaela is her name, the young lady, and her thank you note that she wrote to him for the experience. All right, should we move on? So this is another melody in the beginnings, just beginning to be created. This is co-working with some 7th and 8th graders, and this is all pre-COVID. You have to keep that in mind. So we started because the kids are so interested in the Japanese culture. He brought the brushes and the ink to draw Japanese characters. So we started out by teaching them a few symbols, just like single symbols, and then they wanted to know what the morning star, what morning star would look like in Japanese. So that's what he's holding up in that, on that piece of paper. The next slide, yep, there you go. So the next slide is the single symbols that he taught them. I think he taught them 5 different symbols. And this is a great lesson. So what he did with it is they painted a single symbol on one piece of paper. Looks like there's a couple multiples, but in general, that's the idea. And I think in his head, in Ko's head, as a musician, he had assigned a note or a sound to each one of these symbols. And he had the kids lay the pieces of paper out on the table in a random way. There's no rhyme or reason to it. And then Ko walked up and down the edge of the table and he played these sounds on his shakuhachi. He did that multiple times. And what I didn't know is he was recording this notes. And I think he had, maybe his phone was on. I'm not even sure. So later on, I find out, this is months later, maybe even a year later, what he's done is he has found a melody in this mixture of notes created by the students, which led to a whole nother project, which we just finished. And I think the next slide. So these are students, this is right, actually COVID, the pandemic was still going, but we were back in school and we were able to take a field trip to Bozeman. None of the kids had ever recorded in a professional studio. And the 2 girls on the left were asked to write lyrics to the melody. And they wrote the lyrics in the van on the way to Bozeman. So it was a 4-hour drive. And then when we got into the studio, we Zoomed with Ko and we recorded all day long. And it was an amazing process. The kids sang their Cheyenne names individually. Some of them, and one particular person, I had never heard their voice, like actually fully. This person whispered and said very few things to me in my classroom all these years. And they supported one another. They teamed up and, encouraged. It was an amazing process. And the results of that are in a piece of music called Closer Together. And I think the next graphic will show the poster for the exhibit that we just finished. And you can look later on when you have time to study with a microscope. But in this text are all the names of the artists and students that participated in this project. It was over a many-year process because of the pandemic interrupting our work, and we did our best to keep it rolling along even though the kids were at home. Our original plan was to go to South Korea because this all was inspired by K-pop, the South Korean work, the art form, if you want to call it, music, dancing. And so this poster, of course, Closer Together on the top is in English, the bottom is the Cheyenne translation. The next slide will show you, I'm on my way to what's called Sneaker Week in Portland, Oregon. I found out about Sneaker Week and I just needed to go because shoes are like a super important element in my kids' lives. And so, am I doing okay on time, Jennifer?
You have 9 minutes, but we can go a little bit over. Just seeing who's here.
Yeah. So these sketches on the wall, students were asked to design a pair of shoes, and they could use any materials they wanted to. Once those were done, we partnered with Nike and a fashion designer, and we were given Air Force One blanks. The students deconstructed those blanks and recreated the shoes that they had envisioned. You can go ahead and move the slide if you can. These are hanging in an art gallery in Basin, Montana. The title of the show is Closer Together, where we featured also the music video, which I'm going to show you in a few minutes. But go ahead and move that slide. This also shows the lyrics to the song are mounted or adhered to the front of the gallery windows and across the doors. So we tied all of that together. And then the next slide will show some of the finished shoes, the artwork. Oops, there's one more of the lyrics. There are some of the finished products for the shoes. Of course, there's only one shoe per kid, so hopefully you don't notice the second shoe is missing. Kids made shoes out of plastic bottles and clay. This is the team. Oh, go ahead. You can move the slide. This is the team from the shoe project, and what also emerged from this was another opportunity. So I'll just run through. The woman on the left is Polani Bergos. She was the fashion designer who had the connections with Nike. And then there's a couple students, and Jonathan Riley, who is a marketing person that works with Polani. And the guy on the right-hand side was Todd Adams, who was a marketing person, also sports marketing person. The other people are students and myself. This is at a fashion show where the students were invited to model in Portland. We did that last October. And the student in the black and white garment that sort of has the writing on it, I think the next slide will show her design. She was asked to design an image for earth, fire, and water. And it was selected, and Polani had the drawing printed on fabric, and then Tania is her name, was gifted some money for doing the design work and also asked to model the garment in the fashion show. So it was another tremendous experience. And the last thing I'm going to show you is our team that went to Los Angeles to complete this sort of Closer Together project. Our goal was to make a music video with the lyrics and the artwork. And so we work with Billings filmmaker Pete Tolton, and there's Co on the right-hand side. And I brought 3 students with me to LA. We shot for a week and all over the city, on the streets, at the university. We teamed with the University of California, Irvine. And we go ahead and move the slide. The students also took dance lessons from K-pop dancers. We went to 2 different studios, so they got a chance to experience that. This is all in place of going to South Korea because that plan got squashed with the pandemic. So the next shot is just one on location on a very historic new bridge, and I think it's a $6 million bridge project in LA. So we use that as a backdrop, which you will see in the music video. And the next shot is just a still from the music video. So Jennifer, if you are ready to run that, I will turn it over to you.
Stand by, clicking the clickers. Just a second here. I'm gonna go ahead and stop share and start over because there we go. Okay, now come back. Okay.
Not the me, not the me, not the me, not the me, Nishiva, 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 Nishiva,
Hut the what? Hut the what? Hut the what?
Hut the what? Hut the what? Mokosa, 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 Evanahan, the Evanahan, the Evanahan. Vesa, 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 Time so slow in the moment, but it seems so fast when it's already past. So enjoy the times you do have, for they won't ever last. We should come closer together, closer than ever. Put judgment aside, there's no need to hide. We're in this together like birds of a feather. Togetherness will save us now. After this change, we can learn how to bring each other up, not tear each other down. I'm not sure what the future has for me. Time will tell, just wait and see. This life that we're living, it's all about
Okay. What would you like next? Are there more slides? Do I need to share again?
The only one that's left, Jennifer, is that 10-minute video that's on YouTube that if anybody wants to check it out, the address is on that last slide.
Oh, okay. Then I'll grab that and throw it in the chat if I can. Oh, I cannot. Oh, yes, I can. Let's see. See if this works. No, I cannot cut and paste it. So, why does anyone, do you have any closing? Does anyone have any questions? Take yourself off mute while I write. I'll have to write down the address and then hopefully I'll get it right. Anybody have any questions? And I'm sorry, I couldn't see the chat with this setup today.
I tried to look at some of the comments and I think someone asked about how did I get the artwork to Henny's mom, and I think I answered that question, but if you have more questions about that, I'd be glad to talk about it. I think part of it is just that relationship with parents is so important as well, and being able to make that call and, you know, tell the family what I had. And it's just, you know, that go back to the relationship, and that trust is essential. I also would like to say that I work with one of the culture teachers who's so great about translating some of the words and names and ideas into Cheyenne. I couldn't do it without him, and I'm just so grateful that I have that access.
I hand typed in the address, so I'm seeing if it comes up. I may need you to send that to me, the address to me.
I can do that.
Nope, it says it's not available anymore.
Huh.
UTNM _54 8UTNM. Yeah, I
I can work on getting that to you another way. I can contact Silk Road if necessary.
well, let's see if I did a 2 instead of a Z. That might help. Ah, hooray, hooray, hooray. Okay, here is the link, copy, and let's get out of here. I don't have that in here, and here we go. All right. Yes, I am sorry, everyone. I could not see the chat, but it looks like Susan handled it well. And I do have one thing in here that is for me. Let's see. Oh, yes, next Tuesday, there will be a language and culture webinar with Mina Seminole, Northern Cheyenne. And the second half of Gerald Grade Seniors is tentatively on Wednesday. So just to let you know that we have good things coming up next week. And so Susan, does anyone have anyone left here have any questions? Oh, hi, M. Gallegos. Thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited to see someone else here, but I'm also very thankful to my OPI coworkers and Jennifer Smith. Hi, Jennifer Smith. Super glad you're here. Thank you so much. Susan, that was so inspiring and so touching and so meaningful and relevant and respectful. And, you know, I think all of the things that we would hope Indian education for all looks like in Montana. And thank you so much for hanging in there with those kids and everything that you've been through. And you know, for anybody who's worked on a reservation or lived on a reservation, you know, it is very different from the rest of the world, and there are so many challenges. And when you are having to confront missing and murdered Indigenous peoples and teen suicide on a regular basis, it is a different world. And Susan, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for hanging in there and being consistent for these kids and giving them out of this world opportunities. And I really hope you hit me up when you come to Helena with them and Archie Bray.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Jennifer. It's been a pleasure. It was really great to put this work together. I'm so proud of it. The students, and I always say my job is to deliver joy, and that's how I do it. So I'm grateful to my kids over the 14 years, and hopefully they can carry that with them and do great things. So thank you so much for being here, all of you. I appreciate it. If you have questions, I'm glad to answer them later.